you're
It depends
really,
on where you want to take your risk.
Right.
You know, I mean, 12.5% compared to 50% is a hell of a good risk, in
Right.
my opinion. You know, I mean, so so that's 4 generations.
right. But, you know, the further you
I
go
mean,
down the
sure.
road, the safer you are. And in some
Yeah,
cases,
yeah, of
you have no
course.
choices. I mean, we're
Of
dealing
course.
with not just one item, we're dealing with a whole bunch of items, because this is the way I did the hips.
Sure.
You know, we went generation after generation trying to get as far down the road as we could to eliminate the problem, but it works with anything. I don't care if it's a structural defect, if it's a disease. I feel that they all work on the same pattern. You don't breed carrier to carrier for enough generations, you pretty much are home free after the 7th generation, hopefully. Although it's not necessarily so. Actually, it's kind of an interesting thing, because back in the early 70s, mid-70s, I think, I can't remember, getting old, we're finding that us old people have a hard time recalling exactly pinpointing things. But I did a seminar on a litter that I had that was born that had 5 puppies in it and 2 were solid black. And I literally did the pedigrees on it, and the black recessive came once from the 6th and once from the 7th. That's it. So here is the black recessive. We have a black dog, once in the 6th on the sire side and once in the 7th on the dam side. And yet, all the way through, every dog that was being bred was jewels or sables and so forth and so on. And all of a sudden, we come to this point, and voila, I've got 2 solid blacks.
Yeah.
And they were true blacks. I mean, they didn't, you know, basically were not bicolors. They were true blacks.
Yeah.
So they do
So
carry.
it hides.
Right, but it was the inbreeding.
But it doesn't skip.
Right. It was the inbreeding factor that brought it on, because I had continuously inbred those 2 lines back and back and back, and I feel that it just kind of kept pulling it up until it got to that point, and it just kind of popped out. So it was strengthening genes. That's how inbreeding actually brings up what you really want to see, what's in there. And if you have major faults in there, you're going to get it by heavily inbreeding to bring these things to the surface.
If you have major faults, you're going to get more of those faults than you would if you outcross.
Exactly.
But inbreeding as a method won't cause anything to happen
That isn't already there.
that's not already there.
Exactly.
You know,
I agree.
And it can't.
That's why, again, if you have good research behind the dog and good genetic study of the LMX program, okay, for us it's called the LMX and LMI program, but it's data on the litter mates. With this data in hand, you have a better chance of trying an inbreeding, because you have some security as to what's really going on in there. If you don't know what these dogs are all about, and you don't know what their litter mates look like, what their parents look like, what their parents' litter mates look like, and so forth, back 4, 5, 6, 7 generations. If you don't have 7 generations of sincere data on these dogs, do you really think somebody should be inbreeding? And 2 dogs just because they're related?
Well, it depends on where you start out, on where a breeder starts out. If you have 7 generations of data on a dog, you can obviously make better decisions on whether to inbreed or outcross than you can if you just buy a new puppy. Okay.
Well, let's say I'm dealing with Dalmatians and I went out and bought a half-brother and half-sister. Should I breed them?
Depends on how good they are and what you know about the dogs in the background.
I don't know anything about the dogs in the background. I got them from the pet shop.
Then the risk of causing disease is probably not much higher if you inbreed a half-brother and a half-sister than it is if you outcross into the general population of Dalmatians.
Okay. And if I take the puppies that they produce and breed them together, that's okay too? Just because I want to produce a lot of puppies and I don't want to really pay stud fee.
Well, you may not want to pay a stud fee. The question of whether or not you ought to do it again is based on what you see in the dogs.
Well, I sold the puppies for quite a bit of money.
Not on whether or not the dogs are inbred. What it's based on is what you see in the dogs, and then you make your decision. Inbreeding is a characteristic which makes a dog uniform within its family, within its own family. You will create a line of dogs. You will make dogs look alike.
Right.
And so whether or not you inbreed is not based on whether inbreeding is good or inbreeding is bad. It's based on what you want to do with the stock you're dealing with.
Okay,
And so you must look at your dogs, and you must know your dogs before you take inbreeding as the type of breeding to use. You also need to know the same thing if you're outcrossing.
right?
If you outcross, and let's say you know you have 5 diseases in your line that you're worried about. Let's say you got hip dysplasia, PRA, subaortic stenosis, portal cable shunts, and what else is really nasty?
EPI.
Elbow dysplasia.
All right.
Elbow dysplasia.
Okay.
Okay. Those are 5 nasty diseases. Okay. Now, if you outcross, you may avoid those diseases.
Right.
Okay. But in the general population of Shiloh Shepherds, those diseases are also out there.
Exactly.
So you need to know, if you outcross, what the frequency of the disease is in the general population
right.
before outcrossing becomes a good technique.
Right.
And not only that, when you outcross, you're going to bring in an additional set of diseases that outcross dog has. So if you don't have good background information on the outcross dog, you have no idea what's going to happen to your own population.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the problems that, I have seen happening out there. I was trying to tell some of the splinter groups because I felt that they were just inbreeding so heavily on the same genes and carriers, severe carriers, that our rates were just flying off the wall, basically.
I mean, your pedigree allows you to challenge that point, whether you should outcross or inbreed. And since this pedigree is a Shiloh Shepherd pedigree,
right.
All of these dogs are inbred compared to all other dogs.
Exactly.
Right? Compared to all other dogs. Even so, within this pedigree, there's close inbreeding and there's outcrossing or relative outcrossing.
Not till we get back into the 7th generation, basically, of the stock that we're dealing with now.
Okay,
7th to 9th generation. Everything else is, for the past, is inbred except for the new lines that I brought in. And that was, one of the points.
To bring in new lines.
Exactly. And if a group of dogs or a group of people, because we have so many splinters in our organization, people that just use the name Shiloh Shepherd, but have run off and just inbred on a very tiny segment of the gene pool that is loaded with problems. And I keep telling them, if you're going to keep doing this and producing inferior dogs, you might be better off outcrossing. So again, instead of looking at the possibility of what we outcross with, and hopefully by that time they'll stop using the name Shiloh Shepherds like the Kings did. They outcrossed to a German Shepherd and they quit using my name. But what they're doing is they're looking at Leonberger, for example, was one of their suggestions. They were going to breed to a Leonberger. No knowledge of the background of the dogs, of the carrier factors, of the disease factors, nothing like this. It's just like, well, it's a big dog, but it's got floppy ears, and we might get too many floppy ears, so let's not go there. And maybe a Czech import, not realizing, what kind of problems that could bring into the picture with the temperaments and things like this, even though you have strong ears. So they're not researching the outcross. When I brought in R2s, I spent 5 years researching that particular outcross and working with the El Deutsche people, working with not only his breeder, but his sire's breeder and so forth and so on, and the breed wardens in the dog club, and accumulating volumes of data. And I know where his faults are. I know pretty much. I know some things will surprise me still. I know he carried elbow dysplasia. I thought we were totally out of it in our gene pool because we hadn't seen it. By breeding him, we did see it again. So we know it's there. Esophageal again, we are seeing it in the very heavily inbred dogs. I carefully bred him to a few that I didn't think were carriers, but they were. So now we know that there's carrier factors. So we're learning things, and that's really what you're promoting, is find out what you got there and deal with it.
Right. And do exactly what you're doing in your pedigree, write it down.
Exactly. And that's
so that it's a permanent log, permanently associated with that dog, and so that anyone that looks at this pedigree can see the makeup of the dog. That's what we're after.
Right. Right.
And that's one of the advantages over this type of pedigree, which, by the way, is this is the first time I've seen this type of pedigree where this has been done. But it certainly is the correct approach. I mean, I'd like to see the AKC do such a thing, or the UKC, or both of them.
Well, if you can look at the old 86 stock book, this is really the dogs from the early 80s. It's like 20 years ago. And some pictures of my old dogs. See, they look like big giant German Shepherds, and that's me when I was younger. That was a
We
good
all have
picture.
those pictures.
Yes, yes, too bad we can't turn the clock back. But if you look at any one of these, and there's several old pedigrees listed in there, and we do exactly that. We did it back then, and this is going back, research data going back into the mid-60s. I accumulated this data from 74. That's when I changed my kennel name to Shiloh Shepherds and really went on a full-term venture with the Lord in developing this breed. I've maintained all of the records very consistently, and you can see our hip dysplasia, and you could ask Fred Lanting for that matter, because we were working so hard. I was working very, very hard with him and with other mentors trying to eliminate the problem, and the records were phenomenal. Unfortunately, now I'm seeing the hip dysplasia rising again in our breed, which I'm going to get rid of. We're going to eliminate this. We're going to be very, very careful to try to retain data again. This is, the missing hole is the politics. Politics cause club splits. It causes dissidents. It causes people to do things that people shouldn't be doing. And unfortunately and there's a lot of people just get annoyed with what's going on, and they don't provide the data because they just don't want to be part of the war
Arguments.
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they go, whoo, I'm out of here. And this is costing the breed bad, you know, because we don't accumulate it. And we don't know. It's like walking around in the dark with a blindfold on. You have no clue as to where you're going.
Absolutely. And with hip dysplasia, you really need family data.
Exactly.
It's a
Well, that's how I
polygenic
started.
trait. It's a
Right.
multi-gene trait, and therefore you need family data if you're going to.
And going back before the, I don't know what you want to call them, club splits or dissidents or breakaways or whatever you want to call them, before all that political nonsense started, we have data going back on every puppy practically in the litter. And there's a case where a puppy gets hit by a car or something happens, and we may not, but we were having 70 to 80% recorded data on every litter born in the Shiloh Shepherd world for 3 decades. And now we're getting 20 or 30% at best, because we have like the 20%, you know, people that are out in left field. And there's several different little registries they've started. So it's not just one, there's a whole bunch of them out there. So we have that group with, you know, groups of those little guys. And then we have the large group that says, I don't want to be part of this political nonsense, and just leaves. And then we have the dedicated few that are just going to keep on trucking and collecting data, like Pam Diamond Weed and the Genetic Task Force we started. I mean, these people, Pat Urso, I mean, there's a bunch of them that actually got on the phone and called. The TCCP sent them a listing of every person that had a Shiloh Shepherd puppy, whether they were still with us or not, or what they have done. And these women got on the phone and started calling every single person, asking them to please provide the data. And then we sent out 17-page health survey reports to all these people, asking them to provide. And we told them they could be anonymous, as long as they gave us a siren dam, so we can document it for our purposes. You know, we didn't care when the litter was born or who you are, just give us the name of the siren dam and what your puppy's problem was. And that's how we accumulated all the stuff that we did. So we got quite a large number, considering that, you know, most of the dogs are long gone. And in that age group, we had about 900 and some dogs. We have the exact data that were viable. And we got, what was about 2/3 of them reporting. So I think we have a pretty accurate picture of where we're at right at this moment. And now we're going to work with you to fix the problems, to get us back to where we used to be. And we can go forward at that point.
Yeah, it's an interesting program, and if you maintain the data on your pedigrees, which makes it identifiable and which makes it open to anyone that reads that pedigree,
Exactly.
then that's the issue, you know.
Right. Oh, we do. Every person that's in our program, we have a kind of a closed program because of all the dissidents. So we have licensed breeders, and this is what I started when I opened up the ISSR, because basically this was my kennel. And I just invited some people. It's like inviting them into your home. You know, you set some guidelines down saying, well, you know, this is still my house, and these are the conditions that you agree to in order to live here. And one of the conditions, of course, was the rules and regulations for the ISSR and the licensed breeders agreement that gave them a personal almost like a franchise without a fee. I mean, I did all the work and they just reaped the benefits, but they had to agree to follow the program in order not to ruin the breed. That was basically what the LB. And we have a new one now, which is kind of interesting because the new group of people, the dedicated diehards, got on the internet, they worked it out, and this one's tougher than any one we had before. So when you have a chance, I don't know where I have a copy of it. Oh, here it is. This is made by the people, for themselves. And it's actually much stricter than the original one I had. And they feel that it's important to do the right thing for the breed.
If it's an experimental mating and it turns out well, what happens?
Well, if it's an experimental mating, first of all, we go through quite an ordeal to decide whether or not we should even try this experiment. Is it going to be beneficial to the breed? I'm going to talk to the breeder and say, okay, if you have 10 puppies and they crash and burn, what do you plan to do with them? Are you planning to place them free to good home? Do you have homes lined up for these puppies that are willing to foster them or take them, etc.? You're certainly not going to sell these dogs to John Q. Public. We have to see what we've got here and what kind of problems arise. Are you ready, like I used to be for many, many years, to keep all 10 of these puppies and raise them yourself? So this is a individual situation for everybody. If you say to me, yes, I want to do this experimental breeding, I know I'm taking a lot of risks, but I plan to keep all the puppies till they're a year old so that we can do the blood work and we can do the x-rays and we can get all the documentation of what this combination produced, I'm going to say, go, do it.
Okay. What's your definition of crash and burn?
Crash and burn, when you have a litter of puppies, they have a lot of serious health problems, okay? We've had litters that were laden with EPI, for example, where every puppy prior to 1 year of age has been susceptible to EPI, to severe EPI. Some have actually died from it, had to be put to sleep. Some puppies in the litter may have had subaortic stenosis, and they had to be put down. They may not have hip dysplasia or elbow dysplasia, or some of the more typical things, but they have such a severe health problem. I can't think of any particular ones at the moment,
Yeah,
but
okay,
you know, and I don't
okay.
want to. I don't really want to
Yeah.
point out breeders because some of these people are really sincere and they've learned their lessons and they're going to go forward with this program the way it's designed. And some of these people are actually the ones that wanted even tougher rulings on the LBA because they know what the wrong combinations can create and the heartache they can create. And you cannot take these little puppies and sell them into unsuspecting homes that, first of all, have been told by small dissident groups that the Shiloh is perfect. It's been genetically programmed to be a perfect breed of dog. There is nothing wrong with this breed. Tina has gotten rid of all the problems. And, you know, this puppy is going to be magnificent. It's going to be the smartest thing you've ever had, and it's going to be the most beautiful dog, and it's going to have absolutely no health problems, and so forth and so on. And this person buys the puppy, and then they have all these vet bills and all these heartaches. And not only the dog has EPI, but he's got severe Demodex. It's generalized. It's oozing pus all over their carpet and all over the house, and it's miserable. And it's, you know, they've got little children. They're going to have to put this dog down.
Okay.
You know, after spending a fortune on vet bills.
Oh, yeah, okay. I like that definition. So what happens to a litter that's not experimental in which these conditions occur?
We take our gambles like any breeder. Every breeder has to take some gambles. We try to, and what I used to teach 30 years ago, stack your deck. You know, if you're going to play blackjack, I want to have a handful of, you know, kings, queens, and so forth, and a bunch of jacks, you know, and a bunch of aces. I don't want to have all those little numbers in there because they just mess up everything. I mean, I want the highest availability of getting 21, no matter what I throw down. And once in a while, I'm not going to make it, you know. But and I expect that. But if you have all the different cards in the deck that you're playing with, now you're really, you know, limiting yourself to how many chances you have for flipping out 21. And it's like, you know, anything else you do, you want to get, as a gambler, you want to reduce your risk as much as you can.
Of course.
I mean, you can get out on the road tomorrow and drive to the local grocery store and get hit by a car, you know. Some drunk driver just slams into you and kills you instantly. These things happen, but that doesn't mean you can't drive a car. It doesn't keep people locked up in their house.
Right.
You just minimize the risk. You don't want to get drunk and drive 90 miles an hour on a back, curvy country road. So you want to stack the deck in your favor to do as much as you can to eliminate the probability of having these problems. And they will happen. It happens to everybody.
what's the requirement for students? You said they need, what, 3 or more students?
We're trying to encourage all the licensed breeders to take on some students. For the past 10 years,
And define a student for me.
somebody that wants to breed dogs, and before you jump in, like say for instance Virginia decides, I want to breed Shiloh Shepherds. Well, excuse me, before you jump in to buy yourself, 4 females and a male and start mass producing puppies here, without even knowing the pedigrees of the dogs that you purchased, let's get educated. It's like anything else. I mean, before you become a brain surgeon, you need to go through formative school, you need to go through med school, your internship, and so forth and so on. You have to build your way up to that degree, and we feel it's the same thing with breeders. I feel all breeders that are going to produce life that is going to affect families for many years to come should have some experience and should have some education. And the only way they're going to get this is to become students, to redo the research, to read books like this one, which I thought was a fabulous book. When I first read it, I said, oh my gosh, this is great. This is something that all of us old-timers know about, but the newbies just don't understand. And this is explaining it to them without, being Ma Shiloh. Every time I yell at somebody, they're going like, oh, she's yelling at me. Well, here's a man yelling at you that's a scientist, knows what he's talking about. So read it.
Yeah.
And, we've encouraged everybody in our program, in the BID program, to read this book.
Well, you probably know, but from my point of view, I mean, there is no educational programs for breeders. This is the first one I've ever heard of, in which a lot of breeders accept that responsibility themselves in a lot of breeds of dogs. They do it individually.
Right.
But the breed has no requirement for that, and certainly AKC doesn't have a requirement for that. Neither does UKC,
Of course
or
not.
any other breed club that I'm aware of. And it is something that you really need. I mean, new people coming in never whelped a litter before. How do you whelp a litter of dogs?
Well, not only that, how do you put the 2 dogs together, the right 2 dogs together, to produce that litter in the first place? You can't be an electrician without having some kind of schooling. There's nothing really. You can't even become a hairdresser without passing certification licensing in your state. You can't cut people's hair legally.
Well, that's true.
But you can produce puppies that are going to be adopted into homes that are going to affect those people's lives and their children's lives
For a long time to come.
for many years to come. And you don't even have to know what you're doing. You just go out and do it. Put 2 dogs together, you got puppies. That's not a breeder.
Interesting program. What you also mentioned continuing education. What are you thinking of, and how does a breeder get access to it? I mean, is there in my field, in veterinary medicine and in medicine and many others, we're required to take courses to update ourselves, and those are documented that in fact you took so many cases. Are you thinking something along those lines?
In a way, yes. Basically my background was I was mentored by a lot of old-time breeders that took me under their wing and kind of taught me the ropes. The same thing with Schutzen. I mean, I had people like George Theriot and Gerhard Siegert and those people that took me under their wing and taught me and worked with me until I could fly. Okay, they didn't just say, here, do it, fly, and crash and burn if you can't figure out what you're doing. So they taught me, and I felt that other people needed to be taught. So when I opened up, when I had satellite kennels back in the 70s and 80s, the people whelped the puppies for me and followed my program, but really didn't care about learning about this stuff. They didn't want to go off on their own. When I opened this up and started the ISSR in 1990, basically, and opened up my kennel dogs to the public, so to speak, or to select group of public. Let me reemphasize that. I did not open it up to everybody. I did not give them permission to use my name. Only the licensed breeders have permission to use my name, Shiloh Shepherds, on their dogs, because it's really not a breed yet. We're still under development. There's a big difference. I mean, we're not home free yet. We still have some outcrossing to do. I figure we got about another 10, 12 years before, if all goes well and we don't have any pitfalls along the way. If all goes very well, we have that much time ahead of us before we're stable. We just got off to a good start, and then we had a few political problems along the way. But when I started this out, I had the people that really wanted to breed these dogs. And I said, okay, we're going to start a licensed breeders program, and you're going to learn. And I was taking books, like Lloyd Brackett's book, as a matter of fact, making copies of them, or buying books and sending it to them and saying, here's your homework assignment, you read the books, and here's your lesson, and here's your questionnaire, and if you don't pass this class, you know, you're going to go have to repeat it, and so forth. But we didn't get the participation, and of course it caused some people to say, well, I don't have to do this, I just want to have puppies. Now that we can look back in the past 10 years and see the problems that were created by that type of mentality, these people here, the dedicated nucleus, the pioneers, the future pioneers, are really working towards that. And they also understand that Tina is putting in 20-hour days, but that's all I can put in. I do have to have a few hours of sleep once in a while, you know? Yeah. So what they've done is, it's a pyramid program. In other words, I teach them, and they teach others, and those others will eventually teach others, and so forth. And I've had people ask me, how long do you think a person should be a student? And I said, forever. Because you never learn everything. You know, I've studied the Bible now since 1974, and I've studied very intensely. And I'll be the first one to tell you, there's no way I know everything in that book. Nobody can ever know everything in that book. And the same thing with genetics, dog breeding, or anything else. I mean, there's nothing in life that is out there, even medicine, that you're going to know everything. There's new things are constantly happening. So it's a continuous process. It's a continuous process of education. And a good breeder is somebody that has been going through this process, has had its ups and downs, but has continued to forge on and continued to learn. And experience. Experience is your best teacher. Unless you've done it so many times that it becomes second nature, it's like breathing, you know, you really don't know what you're doing.
But is the Shallow Shepherd group going to provide speakers, or are they expected to go outside of the club to?
No, what we're trying to do is do an organized nucleus. Like I said, we have the VIB list, and this is where our starting point is. Everybody on the VIB list, it's been on OSS, and it's now signed contracts that we have formulated, that is a licensed breeder, has also been told to be on the Kangen list, and they have been on there for quite a while, and unfortunately I don't think it's going to continue because of Dr. Armstrong's passing away. But, you know, they were there, they were mostly listening, just kind of observing. So anything we feel that's important, like when this book came out, it was the first thing we did. It's like, hey, you guys, everybody jump out there and get this book. And then when they started reading it, we discussed the book on the internet, and a lot of people say, well, gee, you know, we need to do a health survey. And I'm going, yeah, we do. Because so many things have gotten loose with all the splintering and foolishness going on. We really need to find out where we are at this point. I knew where we were 7 years ago. I don't know where we are at this point. It's just too much mess going on out there. Let's find out. Let's get organized and do this. And the genetic task force was formed, and we went ahead and we did the health survey 2000. And of course, we send you all the data that we managed to accumulate. And that was a project that took a lot of people. So it's been a lot of good, serious people that care about the future welfare of this breed and care to see Shilohs for their grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
Because if we don't do this now, there won't be any Shilohs 20 years from now. You know, the small little group here and there that have a few dogs that are inbreeding on, they're polluting the gene pool, and they're destroying the reputation of the breed, but they're not adding anything positive, you know. So what's going to happen? We're just going to fizzle out and die. And they're fizzling out and dying. I mean, most of them haven't made it 3 years. You know, they come in, they last from 1 to 3 years. They issue a lot of paperwork, you know, just pieces of registration papers, and then they shut down. And another one starts up, and another one, and another one. You know, and it's just kind of continuous process, but we've lost a lot of data. So now we're pulling together to regain this data.
How many licensed breeders do you have at the present time?
Right now that have actually signed the contract, we have a few bucking, as usual, but I've gotten used to it. It's like, okay, well, if you can't do it right, then go find another breed to mess around with, but just don't mess around with my dogs, please. You know, I don't care what you want to breed. I mean, if you just want to have puppies, go someplace else, please. Serious breeders, I believe we have 9 so far that have signed this contract, and I believe we probably have another 8 to 10 more that are choking on it at the moment. But they're going to say, well, we really love these dogs, and we want to see these dogs continue, and if this is the only way we're going to be able to do that, okay. So we should have, you know, by the end of this year, we should have a very good, strong, and there's people that have been, and some of them actually have been on both sides of the fence because they got caught up in a splinter group, like one particular person, and realized, she had talked to a few mentors that were in dogs, not in Shiloh's, but in breeders like Joanne Cheney, was into the whites, and these particular breeders were in Aussies and things like that. But she had talked to other breeders that were Rebs, real breeders, reliable, experienced breeders, not these, self-proclaimed yahoos. And she realized that there's a problem here with what was going on in that little splinter group of hers, and she started digging, and they all got upset with her asking questions because they didn't have the answers. So then she came to me and said, wait a minute, you're the one that started this breed. Can you answer these questions for me? I said, of course I can. And she's got like 4 or 5 people that have already asked to mentor under her. And she's only been involved a few years, but she's doing it the right way. And she's been on the Kangen list, and she's been reading all the books and doing all the research. And she just signed up for a genetics course with UC Davis. So she's going to be working that through. And, so we kind of have a networking thing, with me right there in case somebody does need a question answered that somebody else can't answer it. But normally, amongst themselves, they can kind of hash out a lot of things.
And you're not using the magnetic pins or...
I'm going to start using the microchips, the dogs that I sell, just for verification because, one of the things that I remember from my AKC world is the phony OFA hip x-rays and, the parentage being switched around. And, I mean, papers don't refuse ink. And you can't really tell what you've got and what's happening. And in the case of my
particular... they're OFA is microchipping now.
Yeah, and in the case of my personal dogs, I want to make sure that the dog that is being submitted for x-rays is the dog that I sold that person.
Of course, sure.
We don't want, for example, Virginia here saying, taking an x-ray of a dysplastic dog and saying, well, this is Sarge, he's dysplastic, I need another puppy. Which is fine. It's not the matter of having another puppy. It's a matter of now Sarge is listed in our database as being dysplastic, which is throwing our records off. She was just trying to get a free puppy out of the deal, but it's messing up the whole program that we're trying to do with the LMX system. Yeah. And this is where the problem comes in. I'm more concerned about maintaining the data so we know where we're going with the hip factors and all these other things that we're tracking than in just replacing a puppy. That's not the biggie, but this is the biggie, and we need that data. Without the data, we don't have anything. I mean, that's what the registry's all about. This is it, maintaining all of this stuff. And the little booklet that my daughter threw together for you has all these charts. I don't know if you've had time to go through and look at them, but it's got, just a few that she kind of pulled off the internet and threw together in a little binder so you can look at. And this is the data that we collect. We have 81 items just in that alone that we keep track of as far as dominant recessive characteristics. And then, of course, we keep track of, as I showed you earlier, the height, weight, color, coat, temperament, the hip data, how many litters were produced, how many puppies were x-rayed, what percentage was dysplastic, and so forth and so on.
Well, there are no other pedigrees like those at the present time that I'm aware of. No group does that. This is the only group I've ever seen that had that listed the characteristics on the identification sheet of the dog for everyone to see.
That's right. Every pedigree that TCCP puts out that they process for the ISSR. ISSR is the real registry. Every pedigree has that information on every dog in that pedigree. As a matter of fact, because of lack of space, unfortunately, you can only put so much on a frameable, because a lot of people want this thing that they can frame up and hang on their wall. You can actually get additional data in this format. And we can go back as far as you want to go. That includes all of this data. And we can actually do pedigrees on any one of these individual dogs. Of course, it's going to cost quite a bit of money. But you can run this, and then you have a pedigree like this on any one of these. So you can go back as far as you want to go. But because of the cost of running out long pedigrees, we actually use the RC program. Because, we just shot off the first couple of pages. I think we stopped at 3%. But we can shoot off like, let's see, and this one here, total ancestors found is 22,170 dogs. So if we ran all of the ancestors found in this RC report, you'd have a book. You'd run out of ink cartridges.
Yeah, of course.
So we just kind of limit it to the first 2-3 pages because that's where all the critical data is. And we really want to see, like... there's a dog that shows up 245 times in the pedigree, and we got several of them that show up that many times in the pedigree, 257 times. We want to see how many times which dog shows up, and then go back in and find out more data about that particular dog. And that's how a lot of our decisions are made, based on these tools. And they're just tools, I mean, but
Sure.
they're tools that we utilize to try to perfect a better dog. So that's what breeding is all about. Each generation should be getting better and better.
Yeah. Obviously, that's what the objective is.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, you know, you can get a pedigree just like this from the AKC, but
it just has names on it.
it just has names on it and titles,
Exactly.
and it has OFA data and CERF data.
Right.
But that's
it,
That's
you
it
know.
from the standpoint of disease, and of course the OFA data only identifies normal dogs, not
Right.
not the dogs
Not
that
the
you need.
dysplastic dogs, right.
Not the ones you need to know about.
And, of course, it doesn't tell you anything about the litter mates.
Right.
And this was my pet peeve back in the early 70s. It was like, well, you know, if you have a dog, particular dog, that happens to be OFA excellent, but he has 9 dysplastic litter mates, and you breed him to another dog that happens to be OFA good, but happens to have 7 or 8 dysplastic litter mates, where are you going?
You're going to get dysplasia.
Exactly.
That's where you're going.
Even though both of the dogs
Are
phenotypically
normal themselves.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is not, you know, this is not the answer to the problem. I have actually bred dogs that we classified as SP, and I know there's a lot of controversy about that, but it's based on the German system. When there's slight subluxation, there's no remodeling, no DJD. We've got nice deep acetabulums and so forth. I would rather breed that dog who's got 7 litter mates that have been X-rayed with good hips, even though they may structurally not be good. You know, one's got a hooked tail, one's got floppy ears, et cetera, et cetera. I've got 7 out of 8 puppies that have been X-rayed with, you know, good to excellent hips. I've got this one that's, you know, a little bit loose, but structurally it's sound. I will take a chance on breeding this dog, because I believe the next generation we're going to just, you know, from that point on, of course, go uphill again. You have to sometimes take a little dip. But for the betterment of the breed, this dog can be more advantageous than an OFA excellent dog who's got a whole bunch of dysplastic litter mates.
Oh yes.
And that mentality is really what brought us to the point, like I said before, of about 3% hip dysplasia. 3 out of 100 puppies coming up with hip dysplasia. Granted, there were some missing links. I mean, people move, they get divorced. And I'm talking before club split nonsense. I mean, when things were really happening, where I was following up on all my customers and so forth, we still got 70 to 80% data on every litter. In most cases, I mean, many cases, we got to 100%. I managed to track down 3 litters, entire litters of puppies. And one of these dogs in the pedigree, I noticed there's like 2 missing dogs. We didn't have, I think it was 22 dogs in the litter, and we only had 19. Let's see. I think it was in this one here. Yeah, there's 22 dogs that were born. Since that pedigree was issued, I know of 2 other dogs. One of them actually OFA'd excellent, and one pen hip, I think 0.23 and 0.29. So we have more additional, so this continues to grow, and this dog is now 4 years old. But she's going to be added to gene pool. So every year our pedigrees are actually updated and, you know, more recent versions, and good information is being brought back to the surface. And now what we'd like to do, with your help, is add one more line to the database and start tracking genetic diseases. Because that's the only thing we've concentrated on. Hips, temperament, size, and dominant and recessive characteristics. And many of them, as you can see, are based on, you know, structure again, and temperaments. I mean, these are the things we were focusing on. And very small, minute few, like hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, SAS, you know, the very small grouping. But we've seen other things happening in our breed, but we never documented. So now we have to work together here and find out what we're missing, what we have to add, get our field, call Barb and say, you got to add another field. We just got to make this bigger.
Yeah.
We need more information,
Well,
more data.
Of course, is one of the things I'm trying to get the AKC to do for 20 years. And they're still nowhere near even considering it. Although it's the most logical way to control genetic disease, is to identify where the gene is, give a risk for a dog, and then a breeder makes an informed decision about what they're going to do.
Right.
And And the only place you can get that is on a pedigree or in an open registry. Neither of which is available at the present time from the AKC. You know.
I think it's too much work for them to try to track that. I mean, if the breed clubs would document this information and keep a separate database, that's another thing that we are also doing. I've got a girl right now that's putting a database together for our VIB list, and it's strictly exclusive to VIBs only. I mean, these are licensed breeders. They have to be members of the SSDCA, which is our parent club, okay, and they have to be licensed with the ISSR, which is the registry, and of course sign the licensing agreement, and then they get into the VIB list. And once they're there, it's on the Yahoo groups, and we have a database that we're putting in there that documents all this information that they can add to and, you know, glean from and so forth. It's a working, open database for genetic diseases. And as we accumulate data in there, it'll be sent to the TCCP to be added into the mainframe programs.
Right.
But this is just kind of an open thing that we're working with. So it's helpful in accumulating information.
If possible, of course, the best situation is for a central group to do the calculation of risk, because then you only have to train 1 or 2 people, as opposing to have to train every breeder to calculate their own risks.
And
the risks are straightforward.
Right, and let's face it, most breeders are not going to stand up and say, I've got this problem.
Right.
Okay, that's been the crux of the thing all along. I mean, I've seen that in the splinter groups. You know, it's
Sure.
like, I bred this dog and I had this problem. You bred this dog and you didn't. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
You know, everything is swept under the carpet and polished over with a lot of fluff because they want to sell puppies. They're not looking for improvement of a particular breed. If it crashes and burns, well, we'll just go find another new rare breed that's making money and jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
You know, they're not in for the long haul.
Of course, marketing that type of puppy is what really causes problems. It's why many people look at dog breeders like they're used car salesmen. They're selling defective products.
Exactly, because they are.
Yeah.
But they're really not dog breeders. That's my beef, is, you know, people that are serious, that are dedicated, they've put their whole life into, and there's many of them. It's not just me. There's many of us out there in all the different breeds. Okay, those are the people that should be called breeders, not the person next door that puts 2 dogs together and has a litter of puppies.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that in order to become a dog breeder, all you need to do is own a bitch of one breed and have sense enough to get a male of the same breed, and you're a purebred dog breeder.
Exactly, exactly. You know, I mean, when my grandchildren come to me with a little scratch, I can put a Band-Aid on it, but I'm not a doctor. You know, and it's the same kind of classifications. Like, these people really have no business messing around with something like this because it is life.
Yeah.
I mean, if they mess with electricity, they'd electrocute themselves. That's okay. They're only hurting themselves, you know. But this is creating life that affects other people's lives. Big difference.
Yeah. And dogs aren't as expensive as cars, but they are an expensive item. You know, purebred dogs. And we sell a product. We sell an inherited product. I mean, we name breeds for inherited characteristics, you know, retrievers, pointers, that sort of thing. And that's really the market for purebred dogs, is the background of that dog. And certainly the health of the dog involves the background of the dog.
And it has to be a major issue because...
And it has to be a major issue, and it is not with most breeds, and it's certainly not with the AKC, you know.
How are you going to change the AKC?
The AKC, over the years, is slowly changing. It's a very slow process. And sometimes I think they take 2 steps backwards for every one forward, but they do. They have done some very good things recently. The Canine Health Foundation is a very good thing. The testing of dogs for behavior, good citizenship program is a great program. And they're expanding the use of dogs. It used to be essentially a confirmation registry.
Right.
Now it's a confirmation registry, and they've added the other characteristics of dogs in their programs that are available for a person to work their own animals. And I think, you know, you have to give them credit for that.
Yes.
But at the same time, you have to kick them because they really seem to be ashamed of the fact that dogs have disease. And if you're ashamed of it, you hide it. And if you hide it, you can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
So you're going exactly in the wrong direction. You know?
Well, that's why I respect the white people, because the white shepherd people have gone straight forward and said, listen, we have some problems in our dogs. We want to get rid of the problems because we love our breed. And we want to go forward with this. And they're doing a wonderful job. I mean, if it wasn't for their pioneer efforts, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today, because it was their effort that caught me onto your book. When after I read it, I went to Joanne and said, oh, this is great. We got to do this too. And if we just keep, you know, letting that little wave effect, it's like throwing a stone in the water, you know, just kind of rippling, the rippling effect. We could let it spread. Maybe other breed clubs will get involved and do something, and then they might be able to influence the AKC.
Yeah, the influence is going on, and they are changing. They are changing for the better, I think. It's just a slow process. There's a lot of inertia. There's a lot of old-time folks. The idea that the reason for a dog show is solely to select breeding stock. I mean, I'd have a hard time breeding a dog that could not win in a conformation ring. I mean, I don't think that's good either. But if that's your sole criteria for breeding a dog, you're certainly going in the wrong direction. You know?
Well, I think politics are very heavily influencing a lot of things here too, because, for example, a German Shepherd, the politics of show handlers versus the owner walking in with their own dog, no matter how silly they look, and all of the other little things that were involved. We don't have a dog that really is, as per the breed standard, that was created for this dog.
Yeah.
So if you can't pick out the dogs that best match breed standard, what are you going to shows for?
Judges certainly influence the standards, and most standards are loose. I mean, they're not tight in what a dog looks like. And I think to an extent they should be loose because dogs evolve,
Right.
and how you want them to look evolves. You're right in the middle of that right now.
Right,
in
exactly.
developing a breed. You're trying to establish what a Shiloh Shepherd is, what you want it to look like.
Right.
Right.
So you have to look at more than just the conformation aspect. I mean, you know, sometimes you have to be forgiving on the ears being a little bit too big, or, you know, whatever small fault. We had one bitch in our gene pool named Carrie, which was probably the smartest, most intelligent dog. She was human. I mean, she was unbelievable. She was tall. She moved like $1 million. I mean, she was just a magnificent animal. The greatest dog I've ever personally known in my life, really. And she had a bitchy head, as per our breed standard. You know, it's like, you have to be a little forgiving sometimes for all the other qualities. I mean, look at the hips she's been giving me. I mean, consistently phenomenal. All the OFA excellence that we have right now in the Shiloh world trace back to Carrie.
Is that right?
That's right. So we have bitchy heads.
Yeah.
Oh well, you know. So we just have to work on fine tuning the heads, and, you know, breed out to dogs that have a little bit broader heads, better stops, and, you know, just continue on. That's fine tuning. It's the decorating. You have to. Your foundation has to be there first.
Right.
Without that, there's no sense in putting on wallpaper.
Well, temperament, of course, is a problem in dogs that is very severe. It's the only trait that I really think of as being a trait you cannot breed out because it's not worth the risk. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, if a dog bites a child, everybody in the world knows about it.
Right.
And all dogs are influenced by that. You know?
Exactly.
Okay, maybe just back up and come into that
Yeah,
again.
just start talking about the temperament again, the importance of that.
Oh, I've forgotten what I said.
Well, if one dog bites a child,
If one dog bites a child, that hits the newspapers across the nation. It influences all dogs, not just Shiloh Shepherds, but even if it's a Shiloh Shepherd that bites a person, Shilohs get the bad name, but so do all other dogs. And we have fear of dogs taking place in this country as a result of dogs that should never be marketed
Exactly.
and never be bred.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and it is it's a situation that is difficult to control. The good thing about dogs is that it's difficult to control breeders, and that means no one can really prevent you from breeding a dog. But the bad thing about it also is no one can prevent you from breeding a dog, because there's not enough training that goes into dog breeders. Generally speaking, there's not enough training that goes into dog breeders to allow them to understand what's happening and what happens to dogs as a result of a bad breeder.
Exactly. And a lot of people think if they had 1 or 2 litters of puppies, they know what they're doing and they're off and running. And there's no licensing. I would personally like to see true licensing of breeders, just like they license drivers or mechanics or any other profession. I mean, I think dog breeding should be a profession because you dedicate so much time and energy into what you're doing. It has to be almost not only a passion and a life's work, but it's a lot more than that. I mean, there's just so much involved that I believe, the people that truly dedicate themselves to that type of thing should be licensed and allowed to do it, where other people should not be allowed to do it. Because I think, again, we would eliminate all of the puppy mills. From one of the statistics I read, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but puppy millers are not influencing the puppy population as much as backyard breeders are. There are more backyard breeders out there producing inferior puppies than there are puppy mills. If you look at our statistics, we have some charts on the internet that show, what every litter that was ever born for the past decade is listed there, and it shows who bred it and when it was born, who the sire and dam were, and so forth and so on. And you'll see some people's names show up 1, 2, 3, and then boom, they're gone. You never see them again. And then you'll see another person's name show up, in 2 years producing 5 or 6 litters, and then boom, they're gone. Never just be seen again. And the trend just keeps continuing. There's only 2 or 3 people that have consistently produced litters over any length of time, even in the Shiloh world in the past. And this is data from 1990. Not counting myself and my daughter. I mean, we're just kind of like, take up a whole bunch of pages there,
Yeah. The data on that's fairly consistent. The average breeder breeds for about 6 years, according to AKC. And that's a huge database for this sort of a thing. So in terms of breeding and in terms of understanding breeding, you have a continuous kindergarten.
Exactly.
There's no way around it. The educational process never stops because you always have new people coming in.
What's your theory on why they only make it for 6 years?
The major thing that happens that's consistent is that they produce diseases that they don't like, that they cannot justify selling to the public, and they get out of it. They quit. And part of the reason that happens, of course, is that there's no help from the organizers, the leaders of the breeds, or the AKC, or UKC for that matter, both of them are involved, that really guides you in a breeding program. With the exception of the educational program that you're kind of outlining, there's here, for this breed, I mean, there is no educational process involved in developing a breeder. And that's a shame. That is a shame.
And I feel that those people that really have good intentions, and they have litter puppies, and they think they're cute, and this was a real fun thing to do, but they don't understand the temperaments of their puppies. So, of course, they don't place them correctly with the right people. Mm-hmm. They may place a very hard German Shepherd, and let's deal with German Shepherd because that's the world I came from. A very hard type Schutzhund type puppy with an old retired couple that just can't deal with this dog. Mm-hmm. He's constantly barking. The neighbors are complaining. The mailman almost got bit the other day. There's all these problems happening, and of course they're calling the breeder, and the breeder's going, oh, I don't know what to do about this.
And they don't socialize them.
And they don't
know how to-
socialize them because the breeder is not teaching them.
Right.
You know, it's a breeder's responsibility to understand the dog, understand the psyche of the dog, understand the nutritional requirements of the dog, the socialization requirements of the dog, understand the problems. Like in our breed, for instance, we have quite a bit of panel. I don't feel we were ever going to be able to get rid of it. I'd like to see it go, but at this point, we're learning to live with it because about 80% of our gene pool will have one form, from a very extremely mild to more severe, but the severe are 10% maybe of the 80 that are severe. But they all will, sooner or later, have a little bout of panel coming through them. But it's a breeder's responsibility to tell the owner. When the owner is aware of it and is expecting it, they're not going to panic and go ballistic. They're going to go, oh, okay, it's
And
panel.
spend a lot of money on the dog.
Exactly. Otherwise you have this, pet owner that runs to the vet and spends $400 or $500 to find out what's wrong with my dog just to find out it has panel.
Right.
Versus that pet owner calling their breeder and saying, well, my dog is limping, what do you think? And the breeder will ask them questions, well, what leg is he limping on? What's bringing it on, and this and that. Give it a few days, and giving him advice and walking him through this, unless it looks like there is a severe problem. 99% of the time, it is panel.
Yeah.
And the dog will stop limping, and then the breeder will say, see, I told you so. You just saved yourself a lot of money.
Yeah, of course.
And this is important. So breeders need to know that part of their responsibility is follow up with the people that they sell their dogs to. I mean, it's still their baby. It might be raised in another home, but it's still their baby. It's a product they produced.
Right.
And, like we said, 6-year term. Usually by the 3rd year, they've already had 2 or 3 litters of puppies now. And now the puppies they produced in the 1st year are starting to come back because they're coming up with this plastic, they're coming up with health issues, temperament problems, and so forth. And the breeders go, I can't deal with this. I sold a puppy. I didn't think I had to deal with it now.
Yeah.
And they're starting to panic. What am I going to do with this dog?
Yeah, of course. And that's ineffective expectations. I mean, you don't really know what's going to happen to you when you start out. And there's no training program, nothing that really guides you.
Right, and the breeders that we have in the VID program, they know if a puppy comes back, it's your responsibility to take it back, find out what's wrong with it, and make a decision whether it needs to be put down, rehomed, or what the situation calls for. And you deal with it.
Yeah.
If your child falls down outside and scrapes his knee, you deal with it. Your mother just takes it for granted that these things will happen. You're not going to raise children without having some bumps and bruises. You're not going to breed dogs without having some problems. So
True,
when you're expecting,
absolutely true.
Right, if you're expecting the problems, and they don't show up as much as you're expecting them to, you go, wow, I'm doing good here, you know?
Yeah.
And you're looking at it from the glass is half full instead of half empty. Completely different mental attitude, and this is what I try to teach my VIBs, a completely different mental attitude. You've got to expect problems. We're going to breed dogs to the best of our ability to minimize the problems as much as we can minimize them, but we're never going to produce perfect dogs. There is no such thing. There is no such thing.
Yeah, absolutely true. We can select what we want to deal with,
Right.
with proper breeding procedures. But to breed dogs that have no defects, I think is essentially impossible.
It's a pipe dream.
Yeah, it's a pipe dream.
And a lot of backyard breeders really think that that's what they're doing. They honestly believe. I mean, I've heard it from some of the renegades that, kind of grabbed a few dogs and ran with the Shilohs. And basically they believe that they were dealing with a genetically pure line. I'm going, where'd you get that idea? There is no such thing.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as not having defects. What we have to deal with in my VID program, I tell people, you have to balance out which defects you can live with and which ones you can't.
Right, absolutely essential.
I mean, Fred Lanting, when he was doing our national special, he kept bringing up the fact that we do have some missing teeth. And I said, yeah, at this point, I think we have to concentrate a little bit more on the missing teeth because now we're seeing more of a problem. 10 years ago, if you told me that a dog had a missing tooth, I'd go, listen, if the hips are there, the size is there, the temperament is there, the elbows are there, and all these other, I don't care if it's got a missing tooth. That's not my priority. My priorities, you have to set them. And that was at the bottom of the list. Now it's climbing because we have ignored the missing teeth, in essence. It was like, this is the least of our problems. Mm-hmm. Who cares if the dog has a missing tooth? I mean, how many people are really going to even know that their dog has a missing tooth? So for a pet dog, this is no biggie. I was running through monorchidism for a while. I had a line that I brought in that gave me a lot of features that I really wanted, but it was producing consistent monorchidism. And of course, bitches are carriers. And you just, you're perpetuating this problem, and it's very difficult to deal with. But I had enough qualities that I wanted that I was willing to live with that for that period of time. And we did eventually kind of mellow it down and wash it out. It's never going to be gone because it's so heavily polluted into the gene pool, but we've tried to clean it up a little bit. So you have to look at what can I live with and what can't I live with.
Right.
And that makes a good breeder. I mean, breeders have to make those types of decisions. It's not just putting two dogs together and having puppies. It's dealing with, what do we have here? First of all, we've got to know what we're working with. And then we have to make decisions on, what are we willing to live with and what aren't we willing to live with. Temperament, I cannot deal with. I mean, a cowardly dog is a danger to himself and society and everybody around him, basically, his own family even. So you can't deal with that. You can't have a spook. I mean, you could deal with a dog with floppy ears. That was one of my lectures 10 years ago. I'd say, oh, well, if the ears don't come up, look at the Leonbergers and look at all these other breeds who have floppy ears. Look at the golden retrievers. How many people love their goldens and they don't have erect ears? It's something we can work with slowly, but we're not going to ditch a bunch of good genes just because these particular dogs have softer ears in their lines. Yes, I will breed a soft-eared dog if I feel that there's other qualities that I need out of that gene pool. So you have to set your priorities.
Right. That is essential, and minor physical traits that don't influence the dog, like cryptorchidism or monorchidism or crooked tails or missing teeth. They're at all of those are at my bottom priority.
Right.
Because it doesn't hurt the dog, and because the dog will function normally. If it's monorchid, cryptorchid, of course, it can't produce. And in some countries, for example, England, you can breed monorchid dogs legitimately, register the animals, and everything. And just because they only have one testicle, it does not mean they have only half the puppies that
Exactly.
a dog with two testicles has.
Yes, we had, MView Kennels had the most gorgeous dog with the temperament to die for. His name was Arbuticel Sid, and some heads Arbuticel Sid. And he was just magnificent. I mean, the creature was magnificent. He had excellent hips, and he was one of the rare dogs that could do a sit-up, sitting right on his haunches, which is hard for a 145, 46-pound dog to do.
Right.
Extremely intelligent. I mean, everything you could possibly want in a dog. You walk him down the street and people would stop their cars, literally. He was a monorchid. She bred him, and he produced perfectly sound puppies. Yes, I know we had carriers in there, but it was like, oh, well,
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, Smokey, our Shadow Guardian's still smoking, going back 5 generations back, Sid is in there. And we've carried on, and the line isn't really, there's a very low percentage of monorchidism, so in that particular line, so I'm not really that concerned with it, So yes, you can do it. Been there, done that.
Are you going to bar monorchid dogs from reproducing?
If the dog is exceptional, I wouldn't. See, again, we had a lot of problems with newbies that came in to breed dogs, and they had some crazy ideas like, oh, you can't breed a soft-eared dog, you can't breed a monorchid, A breeder's been around for a long time. You look at other features and other things that are more important to you, the priority status. And right now, if the dog had everything I wanted in a dog, I would not dismiss it because it was a monorchid. So.
That seems reasonable to me, very reasonable as a matter of fact. Because they do reproduce perfectly normally.
Exactly.
And doesn't harm the dog. Dog functions perfectly normally.
We track it in our database. I mean, if you look
Of
at
course.
the chart, I mean, we track it because even with females, as you know, they're going to be carriers.
Right.
So I don't know where I have it in here. It's in one of these things, but it is documented. So we want to know if it's really heavy in a gene pool, we're not going to cross those two particular dogs. It's again, when you're studying the pedigree, okay, here's my bitch, which is the best suited male?
Right.
And then you look at several possibilities, and you go, well, the RC on this one's a little bit high. You're taking a little bit more of a gamble of immune problems and so forth. This one here is a carrier for monorchidism. Your female has it 3 times in her gene pool. Do you really want to deal with this? You kind of do your pros and cons and process of elimination. And
Make a
none of,
decision.
yeah, and none of these dogs may be right. You may have to look for another one.
Right.
And this is the way I'm teaching the bibs. This is the procedure that a normal old-time breeder would use. And your formula with the disease control is great because we can add that to another tool to be used in the processing, the carrier factor.
Yeah.
Okay, good and evil, this is what I'm seeing here. And a lot of people have a very poor concept of this. They understand the good part because, of course, our breed has been built on inbreeding, in-line breeding. I mean, it's in all the documentation. I started with the carriers in real line, and I inbred on those to create those lines, and I crossed those lines and weaved them through, and then I brought in and out cross, and I inbred on that. So the inbreeding thing is something that a lot of people that get involved with Shiloh's understand that it's a good thing because Tina did it, and look what great dogs we have. What they don't understand is the evil part of it, the flip side of that coin. Can you kind of expound for us the flip side of what horrors can happen if you incorrectly inbreed?
Yeah. What happens when you inbreed is you cause genes to become homozygous so that genes are paired. Both members of the pair are the same. So that every time that specific gene is split to go into the two spermatozoa, they're identical. That's why they fix traits, because the genes that go in each split are the same. That's what happens with inbreeding. Therefore, any trait that's carried by the dogs will be affected exactly the same way, whether it's a beneficial trait or whether it's a bad trait. So if you have a dog with a bad bite and you inbreed on that, you're going to get a lot of dogs with a bad bite. If you have a dog with hip dysplasia and you inbreed on the hip dysplasia on that dog, then you're going to get a lot of hip dysplasia. And there's no way around it. So that if you inbreed, a requirement for inbreeding is good husbandry. Good husbandry is also a requirement for outcrossing, because you don't want to breed dogs that don't have the characteristics that you want. But in inbreeding, it's essential that you select good, healthy animals in the process of the mating program. So you try to avoid litters of dogs that have one puppy in the litter. I mean, you don't want to pick that dog as a breeding stock on a consistent basis, because what you do is select for a set of genes, a whole group of genes that causes small litters, and it's not, that sort of a thing is not a single gene trait, so it's not the same kind of a process that you have for a single gene trait. There are a lot of genes involved in the reproductive process. So selection of animals that are healthy and vigorous is essential if you inbreed. And that point, you can't emphasize too much. Good husbandry has to go along with inbreeding. Good husbandry should go along with any type of breeding, of course, but it's essential that it go along with inbreeding, because of the fact that you are always reproducing an identical spermatozoa in the split. They'll be identical, and there's no escape from getting rid of a trait that's bad. At the same time, there's no you're not going to get rid of good traits either at that time, because the good traits split exactly the same way as the bad ones, and so you concentrate good genes, and you concentrate good features, and you concentrate bad features. So you never inbreed on dogs with major defects. which means that you have to know the background of the stock. If you want to avoid genetic disease, you must know the background of your stock. If you're going to inbreed on that stock, you have to know what traits are there, which means that the pedigree that you have here and the characteristics that you list in that pedigree are essential in making breeding decisions, good breeding decisions. You can make a breeding decision without a pedigree at all. You can say, breed that dog to that dog, and that's a breeding decision. It's not a good one, you know, and that's the difference. So although inbreeding causes animals to reproduce themselves, if you start out reproducing animals that have characteristics you don't want, they will also reproduce themselves in that focus also.
Okay, one thing that the Shiloh people might have a question about is the recessive. Let's say we have a dog like Lazarus, and we all agree we think Lazarus is just magnificent. He's gone from us now, but we just carry on with his progeny. And we have let's say we backed up in time, we have a dog like Lazarus. Okay, not him himself, but let's say hypothetically, he looks just like him. But unfortunately, this dog happens to carry recessively many of the genetic problems that you're seeing cropping up, including the EPI, the SAS, and all these other things. By cloning or inbreeding in on this dog 2 or 3 times in a row, do you feel that we are going to be more likely to produce lads? I think that's one of the things that people are looking at. They're saying, well, I can't see the diseases, but I can see the beautiful dog. And I want to inbreed on this dog because it's gorgeous. And they're not taking off the cover to look inside and go, oh my God, it's full of dead man's bones.
Yeah. Well, if you inbreed on a dog with severe defects, you may see good dogs among the offspring if he's a good dog conformation-wise or working-wise. They may be good from that standpoint, but you will also see the defects that are inherent in that dog. I mean, if he had hip dysplasia, or if he produced EPI, or cataracts, or any other defect, you will see a strong increase in that trait in the breed as a whole. If he's that good a dog, then he would become a matador. He would be used extensively in the breed, and he would be spread across the breed.
Well, speaking of matadors, I don't have the chart ready because I actually had the homozygous charts ready to show you. You know, some dogs in here have actually showed up 9% homozygous effect from inbreeding. And there's various dogs from the different lines that we use that show a very high percentage, which I felt was risky. And a lot of the research that I've done that Dr. Armstrong has out on the internet and, you know, other research that we have been working with also says that this is quite risky. But speaking of matadors, that's kind of an interesting subject because we do have a list of, in here, in this little booklet my daughter prepared for me, of all the studs that have been used for a decade. And the interesting part of that, and I'll tell you who these studs are in a minute because all of them are related. For example, you have Triton here. Well, he's a Sasquatch son. And, okay, where is Sasquatch? Maybe we look at this alphabetically. I can see something here. Shiloh's Wolf and Sasquatch. Okay, so this guy here is a son of Shiloh's Wolf and Sasquatch. We've got Samson Zachary. He's a son of Wolf and Sasquatch. We've got Shiloh's, I'm just going up one dog at a time. Shiloh's Killer Grizz Zion. He's a son of Wolf and Sasquatch. Shiloh's Easy Rider. He's a daddy of Wolf and Sasquatch. Shiloh's Captain Caliber Baker. He's a half brother to Shiloh's Wolf and Sasquatch. Shenandoah the Taz of Zion is a grandson of Shiloh's Wolf and Sasquatch. Pinewood Lazarus is a grandson of and Mason and Dixon's Pinewood Rebel is Laz's brother, who's a grandson, of course. King Zeus of Olympus is a son, you know, and we just keep going up and down the line. So even though these dogs look like, you know, different names, they're all related to each other very, very closely to begin with. And these are any male in the Shiloh gene pool in the past decade that has produced more than 1 litter is listed here. 0 to 5 litters. This, I think, where the lines go, it looks like 3 litters. This was like 4, 4, 4. This is probably 3. This is 5, and so forth. Only one dog in the entire gene pool, as this chart shows, ever produced 20 litters, and that was Bionic Black Smoke of Zion, of course, which was a interesting thing because he was a wolf and Sasquatch son also. You know?